Well, hi and good evening. This is Pastor Layne coming to you from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And with me on screen is. Oh, now I can see Pastor Joel, but I cannot hear Pastor Joel. Once I put us on split screen, I wasn't able to hear you. Let me get rid of myself here, and we'll just go to Pastor Joel. Go ahead and see if volume or the sound works for you, Joel. Are you able to hear my voice? Okay. And if you say something, let's see if I can hear
I
you
can
yet. Oh, it was very, very faint.
Okay. Um,
There we go.
okay. I'm just talking.
All
Good.
right,
Sounds
you're
good.
good. You're good.
Okay.
Let's see if we can both be heard on the split screen. All right, go ahead and say
All
something
right.
again.
Check one,
Yeah,
two.
there we go. Finally.
Yeah. All right. All right.
Well,
Good.
here we are with one another. And I don't know if anybody is out there in Switzerland yet. If you are with us, please give a shout and say hello. We apologize for the technical difficulties it took to get us up and running. We're a few minutes late, and then we had some issues. Joel is not in Sioux Falls right now, he is out of town. And so we just had to get that remote link up and working. But if you are out there and you are listening and hearing us, please give a shout. Put yourself down in the chat and say hello. This is Together in Faith. This is our weekly conversation that takes place looking at the faith of others to see how we can grow in our own. It is Tuesday night. All right, Wayne is in there, Danielle is in there, Colleen is in there. We are finally up and rolling. Look at that. Awesome. So, hi to Wayne. Nice to have you here. Thanks for all that you did today at the office. Rockstar as always. Danielle, hi, yay, I love the little wave. Nice to know that we are not alone here. Thank you very, very much. And oh, Colleen, good to see your name pop up. Haven't seen you in so long because we have been on the road. So thank you for saying hi. As mentioned, this is our Together in Faith. And you might notice from the little blurb that shows up on screen, it says Holy Land Trip. Now, in case you have not been paying attention, Pastor Joel and I have been gone the past 2 Sundays because we have been on a trip to the Holy Land where we were going through some of the sacred sites, etc., etc. And we promised you before we left that when we came back, we would spend an evening, a Tuesday evening, kind of giving you a quick overview of where we were and what we did. Now, I want to quickly put up a little mention here that we will be doing a presentation of this live in person at Eastside Lutheran on Sunday, February 5th, between the worship services, so you can get a little more in person information in 2 weeks. But for tonight, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please feel free to put them in the comments and we will do our best to answer them as we go through this evening's quick presentation on our trip and our excursion. A few more folks coming in here. Good evening to Donna. Nice to have you here. Thank you very much for saying hello. It feels like a lifetime since we have done Together in Faith, but it's really only been a couple of weeks, so it's nice to be back. Oh, and Colleen is here too. I have to ask Colleen, are you in Arizona or are you home? I know Marlon was suffering while you were away, missing you terribly. So hopefully you two are reunited tonight. And Susan, oh, hi, Susan. Good to see you as well. Happy Tuesday. I just realized I've been doing a whole lot of yimmy yapping and talking. And so why don't we let Pastor Joel say a couple of things?
Well, good evening, everyone. Glad to be here with you. And um, yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing not only more tonight, but more conversation about this trip with you all, both on February 5th, but also just in conversation. So if I am always open to have a coffee any and every time that you want to have a conversation. So just reach out to me and say like, yeah, let's go and get a coffee. I'm actually here in the guest bedroom at my parents' place in Minnesota because it is my dad's 83rd birthday today. And so right before I got on screen with you all, we had his traditional favorite cake, which is carrot cake. So yeah, vegetables and cake. Um, it's not my first choice, but it's not my 83rd birthday. My dad loves it, and my mom's carrot cake is pretty darn good. So,
That's awesome.
that's where I am tonight, and glad I get to be with you online.
Well, it is nice to be able to connect with you and do this even while you are traveling. Hopefully, your carrot cake is something that you're able to eat all night long because it sounds to me like it's a vegetable, right? So there you go. Bob has jumped in. Bob and Jan, good evening to you. Glad you are with us. Oh, and Colleen responded. She did get home today and she says it's colder here, but not much. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. It sounds like it must have been a little cool in Arizona. But welcome home. Glad you are back safely. And oh, Miss Connie. Hello, Connie. Boy, I haven't seen you in ages either. Thank you for jumping in and being a part of the conversation tonight. I pray that everything is going well for you down in Texas and that you are warmer than what it was in Arizona. Jan is there also. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, and Donna is saying happy birthday to your dad, Joel. So we are going to show you a few photo. Oh, they keep jumping in. Good evening to Jan. It's like the gang's all together again. It's like we're all coming back. So this is just excellent. So we are going to try and get both Pastor Joel and myself on screen for a little bit here, and then see if we can't also add a photo or two of our little excursion. Now, first, oh, I have that kind of, well, that's the way it is, I guess. We can try that again. Um, but there's just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
quick map of the Holy Land. We put this up before. It's kind of the Israel, roughly, and it's got three circles in there. We came into Tel Aviv. We spent a lot of time up around the Sea of Galilee and then down south around Bethlehem and Jerusalem. So you can kind of see that on that map. So let me see if we can get a better configuration of that. So if we do that first, then that, then that. Did it change anything? Didn't change anything. Yay, there we go. That's what we were wanting.
Yeah.
I tell you, this whole technological world we're in blows my mind. I am the wrong one to be on the controls. We should really have
So
Joel with the controls in Minneapolis.
so hey, Layne, just looking at that map, if you were to
Yeah,
look at that, is there something on that map there that is like was one of your favorite kind of experiences, or one of your, if you were to say like, oh, what I really is there one that sticks out to you?
you know, there's just so many. I've been pondering that question, and I don't really have a good answer because the places that we were so different. Galilee is so different than Jerusalem. I mean, as far as the two parts of the Holy Land. I should probably preface this by saying we flew into Tel Aviv and we started then our trip up around the Sea of Galilee, where we spent the first half doing day trips out to some of the things in that area. And then we dropped down to Bethlehem and spent the second half there, again doing day trips out and about there before we took off. Now, as mentioned previously, Israel as a country has just over 9 million people, but only 1.9% of them are Christian. It's obviously Jewish, but then also Muslim as well. And so, Christians, even though we think of that as the Holy Land and we have all of these sites, Christians are certainly in the minority. And this land also, as said, has been changing hands over and over and over again since the time of the Canaanites, and those struggles are still real today. They just look a little different, but that process of fighting over this piece of ground continues to this very day. I am going to see, Joel, if I can bring up a picture to replace this map. All right.
Okay.
Yes, I am. Look at that. All right. So that's another brief map, and you can't read that, I'm sure, where you are at, but that's the Sea of Galilee, and then there's all these little boxes around it that basically say where roughly this happened, where that happened. And I had forgotten, and maybe you were more acutely aware of this, Pastor Joel, of all of the stuff in the Gospels that took place right around that body of water. You read these stories, but in my mind I don't always connect the geography, but so many of these things are around that large lake you know
Well, and sometimes it's maybe not as clear, because we spent time on the Mount of Beatitudes, right? Which is, at least tradition suggests, it's right there close to the lake, right?
mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we spent time in Capernaum, which is right there on the lake. But then right close to that is the multiplication of the fishes and loaves. Oh yeah, thank you for putting up that photo. That was the day that the sun finally came out as we
Yeah.
were coming down to the lake that evening, and it was such a glorious time. We had been in rain the first couple days, and then the sun comes out, and there is a picture of the Sea of Galilee on the shore. And that
I
was that Capernaum, Pastor Layne?
Yeah, that one
I
was
think that
from
was.
Capernaum, and this one I just threw up was from the
Yeah,
boat. We were able to go on a boat cruise that looked a
yeah,
little like that, right? But to answer your earlier
right, yeah.
question, one of them is just simply this body of water. It was so stunning. It was it was just amazing,
Hmm.
and I couldn't help but be in awe over and over again. It was such a clear body of water as well, and because we were there in what is their winter
Right.
time, it was a relatively quiet body of water. The temperatures were a little cooler. It was in the 50s when we were in Galilee, rainy a couple of days, and so you didn't see people out like jet skiing and things. Though I'm told that they certainly make use of the lake or the Sea of Galilee like that in their summer months. But it was just peaceful, and the vegetation was just
Well,
stunning.
yeah. I remember when we were asking about that because when we first saw it, we were like, "Oh, that's like a really big lake."
Yeah.
And Razik, our tour guide, said, "Well, yeah, in Hebrew, there's only one word. Sea is a sea. There's no word for lake. There's no word for pond. There's no word, so it's all a sea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a sea, but it's a really big lake,
Yeah.
right? And it's lovely, and a clear lake, which is lovely.
Yeah. Just gorgeous. And then I will say
Yeah.
getting to be able to go out on it on a boat like this was just spectacular to be able to kind of have that experience knowing that Jesus was on that very body of water, albeit 2,000 years ago. But to kind of look around from the middle of the lake toward shore, and to see some of the sights that he might have been seeing in the disciples, and to think about they were hanging out there when Jesus called them up and down the shore of this body of water, right? Pretty crazy.
Hmm.
All right. Well, moving on. That's kind of a centerpiece, the body of water. But north of there, I'll throw up another photo. This is the area of Caesarea Philippi. And you want to say anything about that, Pastor Joel?
Well, this is what I found most interesting about this was that uh, this is the place where tradition suggests that um, Peter makes this declaration that Jesus is the Messiah. Do I have that right, Pastor Layne? I think
Yeah,
that's
you
right.
sure do. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
setting is so ironic because this is at the time a temple for the god Pan, which is kind of the goat god and the god of livestock and whatnot. But certainly of all of these very antithetical things from what Jesus was doing, and it's hard to see there. In this picture, but carved out are little places in the wall where different gods would have been placed in little ledges and shelves, and that hole that you see to the left would have been filled with water, and water spills out of that, and it's one of the three sources of headwater for the Jordan River, which then goes down towards the Sea of Galilee. So it would have been just crazy busy. And then there was also a Roman temple that was built there for Caesar. So you have this temple to the god Pan, and people would make sacrifices to Pan. There, they would throw a goat in the water, and if they're were able to find blood flowing out of there, they knew that it was acceptable. But if they did not, then their sacrifice was not acceptable. So then they would throw a child in there, a human sacrifice, to make a better one. And then you have this opulence of um, remnants here of this other temple for Caesar. And so, in the midst of this setting, is when Jesus looks at his disciples and says, "Who do people say that I am? Who do you say that I am?" And then Peter makes that profound confession, "You are the Messiah." And then from this point, which is about as far north as I understand that Jesus probably traveled, um, they make their way back down towards Jerusalem and what awaits them there. But that's just one of the places there. You don't have access to all of these photos, so I'll throw this up quickly. This is a sign in the town of Magdala. Who lives in Magdala, Joel?
Oh, you're asking me. I was like, oh, he's asking a rhetorical
Yeah, I'm
question.
sorry. I know, right? It should be rhetorical, right?
It's Mary.
Yeah,
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 yeah, no,
Mary
no, it's
Magdala.
Mary. And
Yeah,
and 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 there was it was so great to be there. This photo that you're showing is this synagogue there in Magdala. One of the interesting stories that we kind of heard about this synagogue is that they found what they think is the stone where they would have unrolled the scroll, and that they would have read Torah from that stone in the midst of that synagogue. And because of the way that the carvings on that stone, uh, and the way that it was kind of the way that this synagogue was placed, they think that this was a synagogue that was likely kind of populated by Essenes, this
yeah,
group of a sect of Jewish people who they think really were connected to Jesus in some pretty intimate ways. Jesus and John the Baptist, and the Essenes had the kind of their they were more kind of prevalent in the north here around the Sea of Galilee, and so they think that this was a synagogue, first century synagogue, that Jesus would have been around and maybe even unrolled the scroll and read it in this place.
that shot that we're sitting, it's very possible that Jesus sat on those very ruins and did those things. And it's a
Yeah.
still an active site, as I understand it. They're still excavating today. And just about every sacred site that we went to
Mhm.
seems to now have some kind of big church built on it, whether built during the Byzantine era or the Crusades or whatnot. But this one at Magdala was the most modern by far. It was new, and I just love this is the altar piece up there. You're looking down the congregation, and that big boat structure is the altar and lectern, and I just thought that was stunning. And then there was art in there like crazy, like you wouldn't believe. But also around the Sea of Galilee was the town of Cana. And the Gospel of John has it that that was Jesus's first miracle or Jesus's first sign. And we remember the wedding at Cana and Mary coming up to him and saying, "Hey, they're out of wine, do something." And so Jesus then turns the water into wine. This is the church that's built over that site. There are two big pillars you can see, and they are symbolic of a bride and groom. And then in the middle level, you see there's a stone figure of Jesus. And so Jesus being in between bride and groom built into the architecture of the church that was put over there. Down in the basement, they found a stone jar that would have been similar to the jars that Jesus um, went to the purification water and converted it to wine. And so you can see they were quite large. And to be able to find one there is also further significance that, that's probably a pretty good guess that that's where that miracle took place. But ironically, those were 2,000 years ago, and life didn't just stop and freeze. I think sometimes in my mind, life freezes in the gospel and everything's exactly the way that it was 2,000 years ago. But people have been living and dying and raising families and making a living ever since then. And it's a crowded place when you figure now all of these people living in this area. And so you step out of this church for the wedding of Cana, and just 50 yards down, you find that you can get a slice of New York pizza just right there.
Now, to be clear, we didn't try the pizza, so I don't
We
know
did
how
not,
authentic
and
it
so I'm
was.
not sure if it's authentic, but they claim to be. So go visit the miracle at Cana, see a big stone jar, and then step out for a slice. Just kind of strange. All right, I'm looking quickly here. Another town around the Sea of Galilee is the town of Capernaum. And if you look over my head and Jennifer's head, you will see as you are entering the city, it says that this is Capernaum, the town of Jesus. This would have been where Jesus kind of made his home. And why don't you say a couple of things about Capernaum, Joel? Because I know that was one of your favorite spots, or at least one that you really was appealing to you.
Yeah, I could have stayed at Capernaum all day. I could have sat there. It's right on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and so you have access. These pictures that Layne is pulling up is right there, right next to the ruins of Capernaum. It's no longer a functioning, operating city. It's not like Bethlehem that is continuing to be a site where people live. Capernaum is just the ruins of the city. There you're looking at the image of what's called the White Synagogue, the ruins of the synagogue from the fourth century. And it's built upon the ruins of what they call the Jesus Synagogue. So underneath this is the synagogue that Jesus would have likely preached in when he was in Capernaum. So they're built on top of each other. And there's a number of ruins around this place that show some of the different levels. You're seeing here some of the excavated. This is an octagonal church that would have been Byzantine, so it would have been from like the a later era. And I think I'm getting that right. That those
Yep.
octagon churches were
And
some of the Byzantine churches. Is that right, Pastor Lane? Yep.
and and this video here is the remnants of Peter's house. And so Peter's mother-in-law was in Capernaum, and so again, hard to say 2,000 years ago, but odds are these remnants that we're looking at now would have been where Jesus stayed in Capernaum with Peter and Peter's mother-in-law in this rather large octagonal um, home. And above it right now is a church that was built over the top of that. And so you can't see the church from this picture, but directly over these stones is now another church. And then one thing I found really unexpected was also in Capernaum. There's this statue or bronze sculpture, and it is of a homeless person sleeping on a bench. And if you're familiar with Sioux Falls and with East Side Lutheran, you will know that the St. Francis House, which helps bring people from out of homelessness into a fresh start, has this exact same sculpture on their front door, a block and a half from East Side Lutheran. And it was almost too shocking of a reality of life today to go all the way around the world to the home where Jesus or to the town where Jesus lived and to find that same sculpture that we have right here in Sioux Falls at the St. Francis Center. But I realize we're pushing a half hour already. I better get quickly through some other photos. So you just make some comments. Before we do that, Brent is here. Good evening. He is asking, how far is Tiberias from Jerusalem? Like Sioux Falls to Minneapolis? Even less than that, really. I think
Yeah.
it's roughly 120
Right.
miles. I kind of like to think of the Holy Land as a whole as being roughly the size of the Black Hills as kind of a geographic marker. Judy says hello. Well, Judy, Arizona. Hopefully, you're not too lonely now that your pals have left you. Good to have you here, Judy. And Brent, yeah, the photos are just great. It's been pretty cool, and even a wow from Wayne. All right, well, as we were just driving on our way, all of a sudden there is a Bedouin and a camel just hanging out. And so, as much as life has changed in 2,000 years, there are also pieces of it that are so similar to what they would have been like back then. You know, it's a strange mix of of all of this contemporary, but then also things very, very similar to what they would have been. I'm going to throw up a couple of other photos here. On our drive past this camel, we were headed to this place. And for me, this was one of the most moving things. I know it was for you also, Joel. You want to say what this is?
Mhm. Well, yeah, so we're in the desert between Jerusalem and Jericho, and in the very far distance, that hill that seems in the most distance in the upper right corner, that's Jerusalem, that hill. Jerusalem's on that hill, in the very far distance in the towards the right of that photo. And then this is all desert, and we're looking at
Or
this
what we call
valley. There is a
wilderness.
trickle of a stream down there. Yeah,
Yeah,
wilderness.
and
There you go.
when
And
we read
it is the
New
road between
Testament.
Jericho. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to talk over the top of you. When we hear Jesus going out in the wilderness, often we think of woods and forests and lush greenery, but this is the Judean wilderness. Um, very, very desolate, remote. Yeah, okay, I'll quit interrupting.
No, no. What was so striking about that, one, I mean, it looks obviously, right? You can see how desolate it looks, and yet while we were there were goat herders going through, taking their sheep and finding sustenance. So it's just interesting, right? That there they are, right? I and in this wilderness that is so dry, and yet that little valley there where there was some green, there was still water there. There was a Roman aqueduct down there. You can see the very ruins right around the shade there where there's this Roman aqueduct down there. And that was the only kind of viable path between Jerusalem and Jericho. And so that was spoken of as like if you were going to get to Jericho in a day, you had to take that path. Yeah.
which would
I
have
don't know,
been
Layne,
known
if you wanted
as,
to share about the story.
yeah, well, it's
Yeah,
known as the Valley of the Shadow of Death, reminiscent Psalm 23.
right.
And so you're down in that place where it's very, very narrow in this stretch, and lots of places where robbers would hide. So not only do you have the wilderness aspect of it and wild animals and the heat and the sun, but then all of this threat of people jumping out and killing you to take your stuff. And so, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. And like a shepherd tending this flock, um, that psalm that I've preached at countless funerals and other places just took on such a new meaning to me. The ideas of wilderness, and then it was like it was scripted. We're standing there staring into the valley of the shadow of death when we hear this noise on the other side of a hill, and you walk to the top of it and look down, and there's this big herd of goats being led by a shepherd right through it. They're eating, not a care in the world. It was just so overwhelming. Yeah. Well, jumping from there, this is Pastor Joel and I at the Jordan River. Now, I know it looks like we're standing next to a mud hole, but that's kind of what the Jordan River is like. The Jordan River
Right.
flows out of this crystal clear body of water of the Sea of Galilee and makes its way to the Dead Sea. And it's where John the Baptist would have been out calling people to a baptism of repentance. And Jesus walks down to the water. And this is what it looks like today. I'm guessing it might have been a little more clear back then, but when you have desert washing into a stream, that's kind of what you get. And ironically, this is also a place of great freedom as we think of our own baptism and being brought into the family of God. But today, the Jordan River serves as the physical boundary between Israel and Jordan. And so there are two countries here. And when you came down to this tiny river that looks smaller than the Big Sioux here in Sioux Falls, on the Jordan side, you look over and there are guards with machine guns, and you look over on the Israeli side and there are other guards with machine guns, and what looks like a crocodile in between the two of us in this picture right there is actually a fence. There's a fence running down the middle of the Jordan River, separating the country of Jordan from the country of Israel. And so this image of baptism and freedom is standing in stark contrast to weapons and wars and people vying for ground. And it was just overwhelming. Well, moving right along from that, as we were driving throughout the area, I was surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been, but there were just outdoor fruit stands everywhere. Fruit obviously was a big part of the local economy. There were orchards all over the place, and vineyards and places where they were growing so much. Some of the biggest heads of cauliflower I'd ever seen, they looked like kickballs or something. They were so big. And then I had not witnessed these before, but figs and dates growing on these palm trees. There was just so much abundance. Well, making our way down towards the Dead Sea, we got to stop at Qumran. You want to tell everybody a little bit about what is significant about Qumran?
Sure. So Qumran is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. Again, they think it's an Essene community, the same community that would have been in the synagogue up in Magdala. And what you're looking at there is one of the actual caves in which some of the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And in those earlier shots that Pastor Layne had shared with the shepherds, as I was watching this shepherd direct their goats, I noticed this thing happening. The shepherd would pick up a stone and throw the stone to the left or right of the goat that he wanted to direct, and the goat would direct itself away from the sound or the motion that it saw out of the corner of its eye. And so, as Dr. Michael Chan was sharing with us about how the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, he said basically a shepherd was going through that area there by those caves that Pastor Layne had shown, and he wanted some goat was wandering off too far, and so he threw a stone up ahead of the goat, wanting to get it to turn around. And the stone went into one of these caves, and it hit something that and the shepherd could hear the sound of breaking. And so he's like, oh, there's something in there. And so that is how the Dead Sea Scroll, the first of the scrolls, were discovered. Now there's many, many scrolls, like lots and lots of. So they started looking then after they found that first one. And so, but it was caves. This actual cave is one of the caves in which they found the scrolls, and that's the story of Qumran.
Yeah, they found 800 to 900 scrolls, and these scrolls, many of them are different books of the Bible, of the Old Testament and the New Testament. I think every book of our Bible was found in there in some piece, except for the book of Ruth. So 800 to 900 different scrolls, made up of 25,000 fragments that were all kind of put back together, and it's from roughly the first century, these things. So it's just, again, um, one of the most significant archaeological finds in the 21st century. And it's just changed scholarship, and it's given so much more insight to life in Bible times, given so much influence to our scriptures, because the Bibles that you and I have today are translations of other translations going back about 1,000 or so years. So this then, finding these scrolls of those same books that aren't exactly the same as the ones we have, are twice as old as everything that we are basing our current Bible on, which is just mind boggling. So even your good old King James, that wasn't original text. Those were things that were much, much later. And these scrolls that were found at the Dead Sea, um, are twice as old. But we didn't just think about that stuff. We also went, and I was able to float in the Dead Sea. That's me with my hand up there. The Dead Sea is the lowest place on the face of the earth, 1,400 feet below sea level. And the salt concentration in this water, I believe, is like 36, 37%, highest concentration. So you just walk out into it, kind of sit down like you'd be sitting in a chair, and the water just holds you up, and you just kind of float. I have to throw this up because while we were there, I got to ride a camel. That's me and my wife, Jennifer. And then I got to meet this lovely camel jockey who was just delightful. And if you look closely, you can see that he has a pair of sunglasses on the camel's head. So this is a very cool camel. No cigarettes intended there, but kind of cool. All right. Well, moving along from that, but speaking also of shepherds, over towards Bethlehem, this is the church that was built on the field where the shepherds would have been when the angels came to announce the birth of Jesus. And so this kind of, you can see the large angel there over the entrance to this little chapel, really is what it is. But the acoustics are wonderful, and we were able to sing while we were in there. As mentioned, there are churches over all of these sites. So moving from um, the church on the hill where the shepherds were, this is the Church of the Nativity, which is the church that is built over the area where Jesus would have been born. The manger, or the stable that Joseph and Mary would have gone to, it was not necessarily a wood structure like we think of barns today, but instead would have been a cave where they would have brought the animals into. And there is this really opulent church above it, and it shares time with both the Greek Orthodox, um, and or the Armenians, I believe, and the Roman Catholics, and we happened to be there when there were Greek Orthodox services going on. But if you go down underneath them and enter into this little entrance way, you kind of go down into what the cave would have been. Again, you can see it's been built around it, and that's Jennifer kind of going down in there. And you go towards, this is the goal. this spot here, and you can kind of see there is a silver star in the middle with a hole, which takes you to the actual cave floor that would have been at the time of Joseph and Mary. And so you can kneel before it and put your hand down and feel that cave, probably. But Pastor Joel recorded a little video, and so I'm hopeful that this will play for us here now of that experience going down into the stable area. So there would be Amy. And you can hear chanting going on upstairs in the worship service.
Please don't step. Don't put your shoes here. You can kneel. First visit the store, then the major. Faster.
And that's our tour guide, Riz.
Take off the curtain a little bit and you can see it's a natural cave. Move it a little bit. Yeah, move on. You see it's a natural cave.
So you're seeing folks come down to that little place where you can touch the natural floor there. But then also there's a stone manger built into the cave. And so in a moment we'll turn to that, and you'll see some of the actual cave wall. And Riz was really pretty adamant, saying like, no, the stone manger would have been the one, all these images of seeing a wooden manger, but he's like, no, the stone manger really would have been the one that would have been likely used here, um, uh, both for the animals, but also for Jesus. And so here is that stone manger, and we're going to pull back the little blue kind of curtain there, the ornate curtain, to show the actual stone.
Yeah, pretty overwhelming to think that you might have been walking in the place where Jesus was born. Well, we realize we're
Yeah.
kind of pushing late, so we're going to jump forward in Jesus's life here. This was another place for me that was pretty powerful. Oh, and I might have to get rid of our video somehow now. So
Yeah.
please bear
Yeah.
with me. All right, so here we are.
There it is.
That is the Mount of Olives, and that big structure that you see down on the lower center is the church built at the Garden of Gethsemane, called the Church of Agony because of the suffering that would have taken place from there. Here's a little better look at it up close. It's just amazingly beautiful. There was so much art, and I took so many pictures of art, but I didn't throw it on here today. But it was just overwhelming. Now, that's the outside going into the chapel there at the Garden of Gethsemane. But inside, all of the stained glass windows were purple, because purple is that color not only of suffering, but then also of royalty. And so it was so fitting that that's what happened at the Garden of Gethsemane church, to have all of that purple stained glass. This is looking towards the front of that particular church. This is the mural that was above the altar, and you can see that there is Jesus, and they're coming to arrest him with a torch, and he's holding back the disciples from preventing them. And then below that, the rock that's thought that would have been where Jesus knelt and prayed, Lord, if it is your will, take this cup of suffering away from me, but not what I want, but what you want. And so people could come up and place their hands on that very rock, and that's me there, I think, right in front, on the left, doing just that. And when I, for whatever reason, put my hand on that rock, and Gethsemane has always been one of my drawn to places in Scripture. Also, the name of the congregation where I did my internship in Chalmette, Louisiana. Shout out to you, Gail. It was just overwhelming. I just couldn't stop praying. It was just over and over, and I prayed for you all, and for this place, and countless other things. It was just crazy. And then right outside that were all kinds of olive trees, and this is a large olive tree. There are, what is there, 13 large olive trees right outside this chapel. The mountain is covered with them, but these are some of the oldest. What you're looking at now would be roughly a 900-year-old olive tree, but its shoot would have come up from the base of another tree that was cut down when the Crusades came through and were trying to get rid of this religious feeling. And the shoot would have grown out from a stump that would have been the size of this circle, which would have been another 900 to 1,000-year-old tree. So these trees that are there today, while they're only 900 years old, come from the same root system as the trees that would have been there when Jesus and the disciples were on the Mount of Olives, when they were praying at Gethsemane, and when he was arrested, when they were looking over the city of Jerusalem. So pretty powerful to see that there was that continuance there. All right, from there, looking on the Mount of Olives to the west, you look into the old city of Jerusalem, and that's kind of a familiar sight. You can kind of see that gold Dome of the Rock there in the distance, but it's a little hard to see. But you go down a valley from the Mount of Olives into the Kidron Valley, and then back up towards where the temple would have been. But there's cemeteries now all around, and this would be a cemetery of crypts right in front of us. And then down the valley and back up before you get to the wall would have been another cemetery, and that would have been a Muslim cemetery. And then you go into the city of Jerusalem. Here is Joel and Amy out front of the Dome of the Rock. Here it is up closer. This is a Muslim monument. I often think of it as being a mosque, but the mosque is actually on the other side of the courtyard. But this is the monument, which is over the top of the rock, which is thought to have been the Holy of Holies in the temple, all the way back to the time of King Solomon, when those temples were built. But it also then became a holy place for the Muslim world, because Muhammad was believed to have been on there and elevated on that rock. And so they now have rule of that particular piece of ground. But we can go into those details a little bit more. But underneath where that golden dome is what was thought to be the temple that we read about over and over throughout both the Old and New Testaments. Here we have the Wailing Wall, and I'm afraid my camera is going to run out of battery here any minute, Joel, so I'm kind of speeding along, so feel free to jump in.
All right, okay.
This would be the Wailing
Yeah, the
Wall.
Wailing Wall is the oldest spot.
Yeah. This
Yeah,
would be,
it's the oldest thing that stays standing.
and it's as close as Jews can get to the Holy of Holies without defiling themselves and going up into the Muslim mosque. And so that's why they stand there. You can kind of see the dome peeking up over the corner of it here. Here's Pastor Joel praying at the Wailing Wall. And there is myself praying at the Wailing Wall. And there is an old timer who was sitting in a chair and probably been praying there for years. This is one of the streets within the old city of Jerusalem, which would be kind of like the centerpiece, the oldest piece. And then here we have a famous stairway looking straight down as you're going down steps. You want to say a little bit about that, Joel?
Well, they've kind of dated those stones to the first century, and so it's potential that these are some very steps that Jesus would have walked, and they would have been one of the paths that he would have walked after being taken captive in the Garden of Gethsemane when Judas betrayed him. They would have potentially come up this exact stairway up to Caiaphas' house, and one of the trials would have taken place kind of right in that area. And so these stones are from that era. These stones, the stone stairway, and potentially this is where Jesus would have walked.
Yeah, just mind boggling. They would have gone down these steps after the Last Supper and then came back up them for trial in a matter of days. So this building doesn't look so neat from the outside, but it's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is now a big dome that would be over the most holy of things in Jesus's life, his crucifixion, anointing, and resurrection. And so as you walk in, then you look and you kind of have this big, very ornate, almost a lot of these places are almost gaudy looking by today's standards because there's just so much, and so much gold. But this would be built around the cliff where Golgotha is supposed to have been, where Jesus would have been crucified. And then down from that is this big slab of stone, which is called the anointing stone, where they think that Jesus's body would have been anointed and prepared for burial. And then this is looking into the tomb where he would have been laid. And there was such a huge crowd, we weren't able to go inside, but people are able to go inside. But this was as far as I could bust my way through the crowd, stick out a camera, and try to get a shot looking in. So I got quickly shooed away by whoever it was, the priest who was guarding that door. But anything for the shot, right? And then right outside of that, we have another church, and this would be a Lutheran church just steps away from this, where people still worship today. And I just blanked on the name of that church, Pastor Joel.
Yeah, I'm not remembering it right now either, but it is right next to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's in Old City, Jerusalem. And it's just interesting to note some of the various ways that Lutherans are present in Jerusalem. Though the main presence for Lutherans is in hospitals and schools, and the first Lutheran University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, funny, Bethlehem, Palestine.
Yeah.
And so they have the Lutherans are present in lots of social ministries. So this major hospital, Augusta Victoria Hospital, and this new Lutheran University in Bethlehem, Palestine. Yeah.
Lutherans are loved throughout Palestine because of schools and hospitals doing good for the people who are there, even though Christians are only 1.9% of the whole population, and Lutherans a much smaller percentage of that, having a big impact through our mission mindedness. Lutherans have always been so mission minded. I've only got one more photo brought in here. Not quite sure how this one got in. It's my wife standing outside the Razook tattoo parlor, but that must have been a mistake. I'm not sure what that's all about there. But moving right along. Well, that was our a quick, well, not so quick, almost an hour Well, 45 minutes, 54-minute slideshow. Oh my goodness. You guys, if you're still paying attention, more power to all of you. Thanks. No one likes looking at somebody else's home movies, and that's what you've just witnessed. But if you would like to do it again, you can certainly do so between services on February 5th, when we'll have a chance to do this with one another and take some more personal questions. So, all of a sudden, we said tattoos,
Bring your
and we
questions.
got Danielle's attention. So, well, that's for another time, Danielle.
Well,
we'll talk about that.
it's
Oh, look at that.
wait. Where is it?
Is that the
Where is
right
it? I don't
arm?
even know if
All
I
I
can
saw
get it to
was,
show.
it might not be the right arm. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Now you have to duck over a little bit, but
Yeah.
is that a hula girl?
All right, yeah. Well,
Thank you, Susan.
right. No, it's Hebrew.
Yeah. Well, you're very welcome. We're happy to share this and kind of give a little bit of experience, but we should probably wrap things up for tonight, doing like we do with Luther's evening prayer. I give thanks to you, my Heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you have graciously protected me today, and I ask you to forgive me all my sins where I've done wrong, and graciously protect me tonight. For into your hands I commend myself, my body, my soul, and all that is mine. Let your holy angel be with me, so that the wicked foe may have no power over me. Amen. And here is our own little Garden of Gethsemane stained glass window right here at Eastside Lutheran. Another connect that we have with that place. Powerful stuff. A reminder to me of how life happens in the everyday, right? And we think that life is busy and gritty today, but it would have been the same way. Real people doing real things, trying to make a living, trying to make a difference, trying to connect to a deeper relationship with God as Jesus is walking around the beautiful shores of the Sea of Galilee, gathering disciples, healing people, teaching people to live in a new way, and ultimately suffering and dying and rising for us. That it's a real physical, earthy kind of thing, this faith that we live. Even what you are living and going through, this earthy stuff, was the same way at the time of Jesus and the disciples. And that was maybe one of the things that just kept coming back to me over and over and over again. We're all in this together, and God's been there with us and for us. So, anyway, I can ramble on later. We should probably bring this to a close. Give your father a happy birthday from me, Pastor Joel, and we look forward to seeing all of you next week. We will be going live from the Greek Orthodox Church here in Sioux Falls, as we're inviting Eastside Lutheran members to go and be a part of exploring the Greek Orthodox Church right here in Sioux Falls. So we will see you Tuesday night. We will see you in worship. Some of you we will see tomorrow for our Wednesday night meal and activities. God's blessings to